Aye, mateys, remember this as the day you sailed with the Skull Rock podcast. Proceed at your own risk, and mark well me words, mateys. Dead men tell no tale.
Welcome to Skull Rock Podcast, the show about all things Disney and pop culture. Every week we take you behind the scenes of some of your favorite Disney films, theme park attractions, performances, books, music, as well as what's streaming, what's playing in theaters, and what's happening in this universe of entertainment. I'm Aljon Go, pop culturist and Disney fan, and you can email me, Aljon, A-L-J-O-N, at skullrockpodcast.com.
And I'm Dave Bossert, artist, filmmaker, and author. Welcome to the Skull Rock Podcast. If you love Disney and pop culture, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also like and follow us on Facebook, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on our very own YouTube channel, the Skull Rock YouTube channel. You can also email me at dave@skullrockpodcast.com. Aljon, how are you?
I'm good. We're back, slowly getting in the swing of things. And man, nothing worse than opening your inbox after being away for a few weeks on holiday and seeing the flood of emails come in.
Absolutely. It's crazy.
It's the worst, isn't it? I mean, my goodness.
It's really crazy. But, you know, we have a great show. We're kicking. This is our first interview for 2026.
I'm stoked.
And this is going to be a little bit different for our listeners because most of the time we've had directors, animators, and, you know, other people associated with filmmaking involved. And we're kicking off a 4-part interview with Ed Nowak. He's the former deputy general counsel of the Walt Disney Company.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So, and by the way, I also view Ed as an artist because he is an accomplished musician in my book.
Wow. That's great.
And he's going to talk about that career trajectory of, you know, being in music and segueing into law. It's a fascinating interview, I think, from the standpoint that it should give our listeners some insights into some of the crazy stuff that happens to the Walt Disney Company because it is the Walt Disney Company, because It's so big, you know, it has this giant target on its back, you know.
Boy.
And so we're going to talk about some of that craziness. And by the way, Aljon, a lot of that contributes to the cost of doing business, which is a direct translation into ticket prices. You know, and I know a lot of people, a lot of fans, you know, bemoan how much it costs to go into the park. But when you hear some of these stories and the fact that the company has to spend tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars over the years defending itself against frivolous lawsuits and crazy things, you'll understand why these ticket prices continue to climb, you know?
Exactly right. I mean, that's the formula. And those are the things that people forget. And we do forget. You know, when these things happen, the cost of doing business increases every year. All the strays that come, you know, left and right, as you said, frivolous lawsuits, people just going crazy, ambulance chasers, this, that, and the other. They're going to just keep on trying to defend themselves. It takes money, time, effort, you know, and those lawyers, they're not cheap.
No, they're not. And you know something? We're going to get into all of that. We're going to be talking to Ed. And by the way, Ed also, and he's going to talk about this story. He's going to tell us this story. But Ed actually played the Wurlitzer organ at the El Capitan Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. Yeah, and I think that's like that's an incredible story you're gonna have to listen to.
Well, I can't wait. I mean, playing the organ is a lost art for one. Legitimately the right organ, you know, but Wow, I can't wait to hear it. I cannot wait. This is going to be great.
No, it's amazing, so it's going to be a really terrific interview. Can't wait to get to it. We've got plenty of other stuff going on. We've got, comments from our listeners, that I think every week I get something in my Facebook feed from
Oh,
people talking about one of our shows.
well, I tell you what, before we get into what we get into in terms of what we watched this week, let's go ahead and launch into this then.
Skull Rock Podcast answers your email.
All right, Dave. So we've got comments.
We do. Last week's show was just you and I chatting and kicking off 2026. Pam from Toronto, Canada, wrote saying, "Oh, that was a fun chat," which I love. Sadie from England said, "I remember binge watching the first series in Los Angeles of Stranger Things."
Yes.
So it's just, I love getting the comments from people, just saying that they enjoyed the show. And also, some of the social media comments that come in are people saying they're just discovering the show, Aljon,
Yeah.
and they're talking about previous interviews and previous episodes that we put up.
Oh, nice.
So I think it's great that the show continues to entertain and people are enjoying it and discovering it.
Well, I love that. For one, I don't know when you start watching these series, like I can remember specifically when I first started watching Stranger Things, when I first started, and it was a binge. Same with The Walking Dead the first time. It was so cinematic. I felt like I was watching a movie, really hooked me from the moment I hit play. And I
Yeah.
didn't know what to expect. You never know what to expect when you start a series, but then you just get hooked. And while the series Walking Dead kind of, I think, lost its way after about, 4 or 5 seasons, but kind of found its way back. Stranger Things didn't really do that for me. I felt like it was pretty strong overall. I would say the first season is untouchable. The first season of that show was untouchable. And then it came back around, and I thought the final season was very good. As we
Yeah,
talked
I
about this week.
I have to catch up on it. I haven't had a chance to sit down and watch that yet.
Do you have a series in particular that you feel like was just a banger after banger series as of late?
I would probably classify Landman or the most recent season of Mayor of Kingstown.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of great things about that.
Yeah, the latest season was really edge of your seat kind of stuff,
Oh, I love
which
that.
is fantastic.
That's
So,
great.
and
Looking forward
again,
to-
what I love about a lot of these streaming shows is the fact that they are cinematic, that it feels like it's like a really long movie that's been chopped up into episodes, and it's fantastic. What I don't like is that the seasons are short. They're like 8 or 10 episodes. I want more,
Yeah.
So
Well, I felt that way about Andor. I feel like Andor is probably one of the, and maybe the Mandalorian season 1, was so good. It was so good, Dave. Like I feel like that was like the prime of Disney Plus, and I
no,
feel like
I agree. The first season of Mandalorian was terrific,
yeah.
And by the way, I did see the trailer for The Mandalorian and Grogu,
Oh,
the movie, you know?
it's good stuff, isn't it?
I'm just looking forward to seeing it. It just looks
Sigourney Weaver.
fantastic.
Hey,
Yes,
look,
Sigourney
Sigourney
Weaver's
Weaver's
in
great.
it.
Like you can't beat that,
No.
And I feel like this week, Dave, you're I don't like to assign homework to you because you do so much, but you've got to see the Marvel trailers for Doomsday.
I will. I'm going to watch those. Yeah.
Every single week over the past month, they have been releasing a new trailer in HD in front of Avatar. So you saw Avatar. We're going to talk about that. But did you see the Doomsday trailer in front of Avatar?
I don't recall seeing a Doomsday trailer on the head of the Avatar. In fact, the only trailer that was Disney related at the head of Avatar was the Mandalorian and Grogu.
Interesting. Because I'm sure you saw it in IMAX, right?
No.
Oh, you didn't?
Because now where I live, I don't have an IMAX theater close by, but the theater here has what they call the Cube, right? Which is a large stadium seating theater
Yes.
that has a large screen, but it is not IMAX.
I get it. So you have an unobstructed view. It's
Yeah.
very okay.
And by the way, it's a very good movie theater experience going into the Cube.
Well, I like that. I like the name, the Cube. And where are you
Yeah.
going? Going to the Cube. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I like the feedback. Keep it coming, gang. Really appreciate it. I'll give a shout out once again. Leave us those voicemails. We have the button there in the show notes, so please check it out. In the meantime, let's go into
I love the sound of film going through a projector.
I know you do. It's the picks of the week, Dave. I didn't watch a whole lot this week. I was catching up on episode. I'll just make mine real quick. Catching up on episodes of Law and Order, SVU,
Okay.
and
Fair enough.
returning seas. I did actually also watch the return of Grey's Anatomy because my wife is a huge Grey's Anatomy fan. That series, also like Law and Order, has been going around for like 20 years, and it's amazing how the series has changed. There's a bunch of new actors in it. I haven't seen it in years. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I only know a few of these characters now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like everything else, I would say that if you get a job as a doctor on Grey's Anatomy, 50% of you will die in the hospital, either an explosion, a car wreck, or a plane crash. That's what's going to happen because that's what happened to every single doctor that's been on that series.
Oh my gosh.
Percent leave due to bad injuries and they never recover. So
Oh, God.
anyway, Dave, that's it for what I've been watching. Dave, how about you?
Well, I went to see Avatar: Fire and Ash, and this movie comes in at 3 hours and 20 minutes, right?
my
And it's
goodness.
part of the Avatar series of films. So here's the thing: it is a absolutely stunning movie. You have to see this on a big screen. Absolutely have to. It is just visually beautiful. And I'm enjoying the storytelling. What I would say is that this installment felt a little bit long. The first hour, I think, could have been edited down quite a bit. And then it really starts to pick up the pace after that. Right. So the last 2 hours and 20 minutes are really moving along, and it was very enjoyable. But again, I felt like it was a little bit on the long side. And this is the problem when you have the director, also one of the editors,
Mm.
they fall in love with everything and they don't want to cut stuff out. And by the way, Aljon, it doesn't matter because the movie's made over $1 billion in a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
And so nobody cares about any kind of criticism. The people at the studio executives are going to be, James, make your next movie, your next Avatar movie 4 hours. We don't care as long as it keeps making billions of dollars,
Yes.
But I just think as an audience, as somebody who likes to go to the movie theaters, 3 hours and 20 minutes was a bit long when it's not moving in the beginning. And I didn't think it moved as quickly as it should have. And that's why I felt like it needed to have some editing done on it. The other thing I would say, Aljon, is that the original Avatar came out in 2009.
Yes.
Avatar: The Way of the Water came out in 2022. And here we are in 2025 with Avatar: Fire and Ice. And I would just say, how about putting a little trailer at the head of these movies to get us back up to speed?
Last time on
They did that with Downton Abbey.
Yes.
They had this little prologue at the beginning of the film with a couple of the actors from the film saying, here's what happened, blah, 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 blah. Now you're up to speed, and we go into the new movie. How about giving us a little 5-minute trailer that takes us through the first couple of movies and gets us back up to speed?
That would not be a bad thing.
That's what I would say about it. But this is such a beautiful movie. You really have to see it on a big screen. That's what I'll say. I enjoyed it. Nancy and I actually went to see this together, and she thought the last 2/3 of the movie were fantastic, but she felt the same way as I felt with the first hour. It just felt like it dragged a little bit. It could have been tightened up. On the small screen, The Pit has dropped season 2. on HBO Max. And if you haven't seen the show, this is absolutely a fantastic show. It's a realistic examination of the challenges facing healthcare workers in America as seen through the lens of the frontline heroes working in a modern day hospital, really in the emergency room of a hospital in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the first season won primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Drama Series. What they do with each season, Aljon, is that it's a 12-hour shift. So each episode is an hour of that shift, right? That's the season. So you're
That's
going
not
through a 12-hour shift with these doctors and nurses in the emergency room. And it's just a great ensemble cast led by Noah Weil.
That's great.
It's just really, I think this is one of the best shows on television. And I don't say that lightly, but if you get a chance, watch The Pit on HBO Max. Okay. And I think you can watch it on other streaming services, but there may be a fee or something.
Yeah.
And then I started watching a show on BritBox through Amazon Prime. It's called The Game, and it's basically a detective is haunted by an unresolved case, and he's retired now. So the retired detective's peace is shattered when his new neighbor repeats a killer's chilling phrase, sparking a dangerous game of suspicion and obsession. And this is season 1. It's brand new. It's a 2025 mystery series. Really terrific. The first episode sets it up very nicely. Some well-known British actors are in this show, and so far, after the first episode, I really enjoyed it, and I'm going to watch the remaining. I think there's only 4 episodes or 5 episodes for this particular show.
Interesting.
And that's it. That's all I've been watching this week.
Well, that's great. The Pit sounds like a great show. I'm going to have to check that out for sure.
It really is, and it's quite realistic in its portrayal of what goes on in an emergency room, and very, in some instances, graphic.
Wow.
From the gore standpoint, like cutting people open and stuff like that.
Sure.
Really, really well done. I mean, it looks realistic.
Well, that's good. Well, Noah's no stranger to doctor's hospital.
That's right. He was on ER
for many years. Yeah, for sure. Well, gang, what have you been watching? Let us know, and we'll check it out in a future episode.
Skull Rock Podcast. This week in Disney and pop culture.
All right, Dave, as you said, box office Avatar, Fire and Ash continues its winning streak with 20 million plus. That is huge because it's got a huge streak. January launched. It lands at number 1 for the 4th weekend in a row. That is huge. And I would say Avatar earned 5 million in ticket sales on Friday, expected to pull 20 million at the box office.
Was that the 4th weekend or something?
4th weekend. So it cleared globally, as you said, $1 billion after 3 weekends in the cinema. That's huge. And the Paramount Horror, Primate, and Lionsgate Greenland 2 Migration also in the mix as well. Primate scoring, 11 million over the weekend, and Greenland 2, a sequel to the 2020 disaster movie, expected to have 10 million in North America alone.
Very timely to come out with the sequel to Greenland.
Greenland, I know, right? It's
with all the news about Greenland happening in the geopolitical scene.
Exactly.
But I did see the original Greenland, and it is streaming on one of the services or several of the services.
There you go.
As I recall, I enjoyed that movie. It is sort of a post-apocalyptic survival type film, and I'm interested in seeing Greenland 2 because I had seen the first one and I enjoyed it. Gerard Butler is the lead.
Good actor there.
Yeah,
well, very good. I appreciate that. You know what else I appreciate, Dave? I just found a couple of these quick hits there. Did you see that Tom Cruise visited the Star Wars Starfighter set? Did you see that?
I did not see that.
Okay, so this is the deal. Sean Levy, of course, from Deadpool, Wolverine, and most notably Stranger Things. He was a director of a lot of episodes for last season. Revealed to the New York Times that Tom Cruise visited the set of a new film that he's doing for his film Star Wars Starfighter a couple of weeks ago and ended up filming one of the movie's lightsaber duels. Now, Ryan Gosling is starring in this Star Wars tentpole film that's going to be in theaters supposedly in May of 2027. Now, initially, the Star Wars fans, we thought that maybe this movie was going to be in a wholly new era, unexplored timeline of the Star Wars saga, not directed or anywhere pointed to the Skywalker saga in any way. But apparently, Tom Cruise came in on his helicopter, dropped in on the set. Sean Levy thought it was a joke, but no, it was actually him. And he actually was like, "Hey, can you let me direct and film like this lightsaber duel?" And everybody was like, "What? Lightsabers in this era of Star Wars? Awesome!" So he literally just got wet, I guess, in some kind of bog, and then started filming. Can you believe that, Craig? Wow!
I mean, I think is it going to be in the movie?
I think so. Cruz, quote, Levy says, Cruz just wanted to watch. Then he told him, but Levy setting up a scene involving a lightsaber duel in the water suggested the star jump on one of the cameras. He meant it as a joke, but there was Cruz wading into the muddy pond holding the camera like a pro. Now, when you see this movie, you'll know what part it was that was shot by Tom. How cool is that? Last week, Steven Spielberg was here. Now Tom Cruise is wielding a camera, ruining his very nice shoes. That's what it was. It was like, I bet they were nice shoes. I bet they were.
Wow.
I love that. I can't wait to see this new Star Wars. It's going to be great. So Marvel cancels a solo movie announced in 2019 with a twist. This comes to us, I guess, from Superhero Hype, Dave, and I've heard about this. So you've heard that the Blade movie was going to be rebooted in 2019. Mahershala Ali was going to play Blade, the titular character that really was the initial, I guess, the kickoff of the new Marvel movies back about 20, maybe even 25 years ago, perhaps, with Wesley Snipes. Remember those Blade movies?
Yes, I absolutely remember those Blade movies. In fact, wasn't long after those Blade movies that Wesley Snipes seemed to have disappeared.
He really did. And then, you were working on, after Blade started, then you worked on Spider-Man, which, by the way, we put up a short of Dave, you talking about.
I saw that. Thank you for that.
It was a great little short about you working on Spider-Man. Amazing stuff. But Mahershala Ali's Blade is now canceled. They've had issues, and apparently, even though that movie's canceled, that they announced in 2019 with Mahershala Ali, it looks like they're going to be doing a Midnight Suns movie, and this is going to be one of the movies that is going to follow Doomsday and Secret Wars in the MCU. They're going to have a Midnight Suns kind of team up movie, and not only is Blade and Mahershala Ali supposed to be in it, but apparently they're going to have a bunch of other characters in there as well, perhaps even Doctor Strange, who was initially part of this series. Well, Moon Knight was also part of the comic series, Werewolf by Night, Man-Thing, Elsa Bloodstone, where those characters are in the Werewolf by Night. So a lot of those supernatural kind of characters, including Moon Knight, which, by the way, is a great series too, by the way, on Disney Plus.
I love Moon Knight. I don't know, is that coming back?
It looks like it may not, but the character will. So maybe this is going to be the successor to bring those kind of supernatural characters and that horror genre all together. You've got the Vampire Slayer with Blade. You've got Werewolf by Night. You've got Man-Thing. You've got Elsa Bloodstone. And, of course, maybe even Doctor Strange there as well. So that looks like it's going to be really good. We'll see what happens there.
I think that's awesome.
I think so, too. Oop. What was my sound effect?
Obituary roll call.
Oh, there you go. All right, Dave. Now from the news to this week's passing of a musical legend, Bob Weir, Grateful Dead co-founder, passes at the age of 78. And this just happened as we record this just yesterday. The singer-songwriter, rhythm guitarist known for his craftsmanship on such songs as Sugar Magnolia and playing in the band, Dave, many people love the Grateful Dead, and Bob Weir, one of its founding members, an amazing musician and producer in his own right. Dave, what say you about his life and career?
It's kind of the end of an era. He's the original co-founder of the Grateful Dead with Jerry Garcia, and boy, he just carried on after Jerry Garcia, passed away unexpectedly back in the 90s. What was it, 95 or something, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really is the end of an era. I had seen some stuff with Bob Weir over the last year or two, and he seemed to be doing great,
Did
So
too. Apparently transitioned peacefully, according to his family. He was courageously battling cancer, and he was diagnosed in July, but returned to his hometown stage next month for a 3-night celebration of 60 years of iconic music at the Golden Gate Park. And just very, very sad. But once again, what a great life. And of course, he had such a musical legacy, touring for decades and decades, and his fellow bandmates, of course. It is an end of an era. So very sad news, but what a great life. How about this, Dave? Sidney Kubrick, child actor in Our Gang comedy shorts, dies at 97. Wow.
now that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You
He
live
played-
into your late 90s, you're doing okay. You had a good life.
Yeah, no doubt. He played the bad kid known as Boim, Butch's sidekick in the
Yep.
Hal Roach films before calling it a career when he was 15. I know that face. That face was the face of a bad kid.
And by the way, I mean, if you read that obituary, he was making $750 a week
That's
when
a
they
lot of
were
money.
filming in the Depression. That was some big bucks. That was coin, man.
Oh yeah, he was making some coin. And by the way, it's Kubrick, Sidney Kubrick, and I spoke and said Kubrick, but
That's
Kubrick.
okay. We butcher names here on Skull Rock.
That's what we do for sure. But once again, his older brother Leonard Kubrick played the main character and troublemaker in the series, giving Spanky, Alfalfa, and Buck and Darla a hard time before Bond replaced him in 1930. The youngest of 3 kids, he was born in Minneapolis on July 2nd, 1928. Came to LA as an infant family. Whoa, what a career. What a career. Pedersen, CGI pioneer of 2001, A Space Odyssey, and visual effects artist, also passing at the age of 91. He and Douglas Trimble went on from creating a short film in 1964's World Fair to working on many months on the Kubrick classic. The film absolutely would not have happened without Khan. That name I know from visual effects for sure.
Yeah.
He worked on a lot of different films. I know him from sci-fi, especially working with Douglas Trimble, who was also a pioneer in the field as well. What a great person in film. He worked for Southern California-based Graphic Films, produced content for NASA, wrote and directed To the Moon and Beyond, a 15-minute film narrated by Rod Serling. Did a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he really did. He had an incredible career and really is one of the pioneers of modern special effects.
Love it. Love it. Here's an untimely death, Dave. At the age of 69, The Thing and Space Jam star T.K. Carter found dead at his home at the age of 69. Wow, this guy, he's been in a lot of films back, and I would say, maybe his career really hit its zenith maybe about 20 years ago. But I remember him in Kurt Russell and in The Thing, which was a great, great film. I really appreciated that film. But he's been in a bunch of different shows like Good Times, The Waltons, The Jeffersons in the late 70s. He's cast at Knowles in John Carpenter's The Thing alongside Kurt Russell. He's just been a lot of different things.
And you know something, again, another very familiar face of an actor that's not a household name, but somebody who really had an incredible career and was in a lot of things. And when you see his face, you're like, I recognize him from all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Alongside 1996, he was chosen to voice the nerd-luck alien Knot in Space Jam with Michael Jordan and Wayne Knight. Just very sad. Very sad. Yeah. Also, a long life, Gunsmoke star Roger Ewing, dead at the age of 83. Roger Ewing, best known for his Deputy Marshal Thad Greenwood in Gunsmoke, has passed away. Once again, if you're a big fan of the shows of that era, you'll know his face. It's a very, very long career. working in TV and such. And then Alan Alper, music director and film composer, passes away at the age of 78. Son of the MCA talent agent, he worked with the likes of Mitzi Gaynor, Florence Henderson, Charo, and Debbie Reynolds during his career. I think we've seen that once again. He had a zenith in his career back in the late 70s. As you can see, as a pianist, Alper composed scores for low-budget films like The Bang Bang Gang, Caged Men, Wild Riders, Hollywood Babylon, Super Chick, Inferno in Paradise, Black Gestapo, and On Any Sunday Too. So he definitely had, one of those careers of providing music for those types of films for sure. And last but not least, Guy Moon, Fairly Odd Parents and Danny Phantom composer, dies at the age of 63. Wow.
This is so sad because this was a traffic accident.
Yeah, for sure. He left his unmistakable legacy and will be profoundly missed. His family and countless others who he impacted. Yeah. Announcement was made by his family. He died of traumatic injury sustained in a traffic collision.
Yeah, it's just terrible. Terrible. Absolutely awful.
A 4-time Emmy nominee, Moon worked on The Fairly Odd Parents, led to his 10 full-season run on Nickelodeon in 2001, starting in 2001. He lent his musical talents to a number of animated TV series, including Danny Phantom, Tough Puppy, Bunsen is a Beast, Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle, 1992's The Addams Family. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, he did a lot. Yeah.
He certainly did. Well, that is the passings for this week. May they all rest in peace. Now let's get into this, the main attraction for this week. Ed Nowak is on the show, former deputy general counsel for the Walt Disney Company. Can't wait to hear it right here on Skull Rock Podcast.
Let's do it.
Hey, let's chat.
Let's chat afterwards. Let's chat. And he said, let's chat again.
Skull Rock Podcast. Interview time.
Well, Aljon, we've got another fantastic and distinguished guest this week. We've got Ed Nowak, who is the former Deputy General Counsel of the Walt Disney Company. Ed, welcome to the show.
Dave, I am gratified to be here. But when I got here to the Paul Rock studios, I went straight to the green room, and there was a guy in a uniform who said the door was locked. So I went upstairs to the famous Skull Rock commissary,
Yes.
but it was empty,
Okay.
and the coffee machine was out of order. So I came back down here to the studio, and I couldn't help noticing that the audience has already left. So I've got to ask you, are you sure you want a Disney lawyer on this podcast?
I see that you're very observant and taking a lot of notes. I hope you didn't see Don Hahn still milling around in the green room.
I'd know him anywhere. No.
Well, Ed, you and I have been friends for a long time. In fact, I want our listeners to know that Roy Disney introduced me to you many, many, many decades ago.
This is true.
And the one thing that I want our listeners to know is that you're not really a lawyer. You're not just a lawyer, because from my perspective, I've always looked at you as an artist because you're really a musician. You're a musician masquerading as a lawyer, or maybe masquerading is a bad word, but you're a musician who is playing the part of a lawyer.
Well, that's not too different from how I saw myself at the end of my college career, where I switched my vocation from a practicing musician and a possible professor of music to law school. And when I went into law school, I said, I'm a musician who happens to be in law school. And then 3 years later, I was a lawyer who used to be a musician.
So I guess I'm always curious, and I want to ask you, like, how did that happen? Like, you had a love for music, obviously. Were you taking music lessons or learning a particular instrument when you were younger in grade school or something?
Oh, yeah. The family story, and I remember a little bit of it. I was supposedly around 3 or 4 years old. And you remember in the early 50s, the original Dragnet series?
Well, I remember seeing it in reruns because the early 50s is before my time.
Well, the first one was on my time, and it had, you'll remember, a very distinctive theme.
Yeah.
And it was odd because of the note sequence. It was unusual. And supposedly the television was on. We heard the theme, the show went off. I went up and got on the piano stool and plunked out the theme, which
Really?
included this weird, what they call a tritone. If it were playing in C minor, it would be a leap from C to F sharp, which is not, was not the norm at the time for a television theme song.
And by the way, that's Latin to me. I don't know what you just said.
Well, there are probably some people listening to us who know what it is.
I'm sure.
It's look, it would have been unusual for the 4-year-old to get up and just plunk out the first part of the theme, but this was a weird dum 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 dum.
Wow.
And the adults in the room all looked at each other and said, "Uh-oh." And that began my lifelong connection to the piano. And I started taking lessons.
And I just want to ask that, like, were you considered like a prodigy?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, Mozart was a prodigy. He was writing symphonies when he was still, I don't think he was 11 years old when he wrote. I mean, just such a grasp of music from the inside.
Yeah.
What I had was the ability to just kind of soak up what I heard and somehow translate that into what you need to do at the keyboard. It just came like naturally, like riding a bicycle.
So like to equate it to like an animator being in a drawing class and looking at a model standing on a pedestal and being able to draw that fairly accurately on paper. It's a similar kind of a thing. You're hearing something and you're able to replicate it on a keyboard.
Yes, I that's apt.
Okay.
And so I had this kind of double series of lessons through the piano. I had real lessons to learn the technique, and then I had this processing ability to pick up on anything I heard. And so I started a genuine musical career. By the time I was 12 or 13, I got my my AFM card. I joined the union.
How did that come about? I mean, you had to have been working then.
Well, I had started working, and this was in order to keep working. My father had been a member of the union for years. He played piano, and he was, in fact, my first teacher. And so I did all kinds of things. I mean, I was playing, weddings and bar mitzvahs and birthday parties and playing in small local clubs in New Jersey. I played through high school. I had a band that was kind of a cover band imitating Herb Alpert and the
Wow.
Tijuana Brass, and we did some work as a backup band for some shows when I was in high school. And does anybody remember Zachary out here?
I don't.
Zachary was the first television horror movie host, and they used to run his shows. Were done in New York, but they ran them on KHJ out here. And Zachary eventually went over onto the music side, and he had a teenage dance show on the station in Newark, New Jersey, and we worked the show a few times, and then he was using us as a backup. And one of my great experiences at 17 was backing up a guy called Screamin' Jay Hawkins on a show that Zachary backed. Screaming Jay Hawkins was one, briefly, a giant of early rock and roll in the 50s.
Okay.
And so here we are in the middle of the 60s, and he's doing a comeback, and I'm playing trumpet in the backup band.
I didn't know you
for
played
him.
trumpet. I
Yeah.
always associated you with the piano.
Well, I stopped playing the trumpet long before I stopped playing the piano. But yeah, you couldn't march in the high school band with the piano, so I decided I was going to play the trumpet, and I played that through high school and college. I was a church organist for 8 or 9 years. I taught a class in ragtime when I was in law school. And
Well, yeah, but I got to ask you, with all of that experience and being in the union at such an early age and doing all these gigs and then going to college for music, what speed bump did you hit that threw you onto the path of being a lawyer?
well, in college, I got a job playing in a club in Greenwich Village for a couple of years. And I was able to work with really top guys, some of the best musicians that I've ever heard, let alone worked with. And it began to dawn on me that even though I could do what I could do, it was probably not going to be good enough to reach the top level in the business, which I would have wanted to do. And I was at Columbia for my undergraduate degree, and even though I was studying with an excellent concert pianist from Norway, a man called Niels Østby, wonderful guy, Columbia did not have a performing major. You were either going to be a musicologist or a historian or do composition. You could study the instrument, but you couldn't major in it. And so once again, I said, I'm not gonna, I can't practice 8 hours a day. I can't do this. And it just wasn't going to work out for me as a business. So what I intended to be my vocation became an avocation. And the thing that I was always interested in history, and I made the mistake of thinking that studying law was going to be a lot like studying history. It wasn't, but nonetheless, I persisted and came out the other end with something that I also really enjoyed doing. And I never gave up the music. I mean, I was playing on the side while I was practicing law in New York.
One of my early memories, not long after we got to know each other, was I remember walking into the main theater on the Disney studio lot, and you were down in the front on the piano playing, and it was, I believe it was for the Annette Funicello memorial.
It was. I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Someone asked me whether I would want to play live to film to accompany Tommy Cole, one of the original Musketeers. He was going to do a tribute to Annette dancing, ballet. Why they decided to do it live to film, I don't know. But when I was asked, I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Tommy and I did that a couple of times afterward.
I thought it was fantastic. And again, it galvanized the sort of the idea in my head that my friend Ed is an artist, and he happens to be a lawyer here at the company, but he's an artist.
Well, I tried. Now, you knew when Roy brought us together,
Yeah,
that I had a piano in my office.
Yes, and I was going to bring that up because I think our listeners are going to love this story. So can you describe the piano and tell them the provenance?
Well, I was 2 days an employee of the studio, and my then boss, the guy who hired me, Joe Shapiro, general counsel, also knew. He said, he knew from stories and reputation, you play the piano, you got to have one. And so 2 days after I got there, guys are coming down the hall of the old animation building to where our legal department offices were then, and with a piano. And the story is that it came out of one of the small projection rooms, all of which had pianos in the older days, and that it had been a piano or the piano used by the Sherman brothers. Now it's
And this is an upright piano,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah, nice, pretty ebony Sommer piano of unknown age and suspicious provenance, but I had it with me for 36 years.
Yeah, well, every time I came to your office, I mean, you couldn't help. I mean, you walked through the door; it was right, opposite the door against the wall.
It blended very well. Yeah.
It really did. It really did. Do you feel like the music because you were a music major undergrad?
Yeah.
Did that help you going through legal school in any way?
That's an interesting question.
And the reason why I ask that, Ed, is that I always feel like, if you were sort of a prodigy, if you will, and I'll use that lightly because you don't want to be called a prodigy, but if you're a prodigy in one thing, does that have influence on other aspects of a career or interests that you would have? And do you look at a law case differently because you have all this music in your head?
Well, one thing that occurs to me is, and I don't know whether this is a function of the subject matter itself or whether it's just something innate, but memorization, the ability to retain, and to
recall,
sponge up all this information and kind of synthesize it and translate it to a keyboard or to articulate it as you need to do if you're presenting something, say, to a jury or a judge. There are those similarities. There's technique that can be applied in more than one direction.
Yeah, and I imagine, like, a lot of musicians that I know, they can just pick up an instrument or sit down at the piano, and all of a sudden they're just playing something, and then they can switch and play something different. And so all of that music is in their heads, and they know how to put it out through the instrument they're holding or sitting at.
You take the card file, and it's flipping real fast inside your head, and and then eventually it becomes second nature. And you have to be able to do that. You're on your feet in a courtroom. You've got to know what you need to reach back to in order to put together into a sentence that, makes sense on the spot.
Yeah. And so you graduated from Columbia Law?
Yeah.
And you passed the bar in New York?
Yes.
And you started practicing in New York. Did you join a firm, or what was that process before you got to Disney?
Well, yeah, I practiced in a big firm for give or take 10 years.
Wow.
And I had an unusual experience for what was then regarded as a Wall Street firm, and it was one of the best, oldest, well-known Wall Street firms as a litigator.
And a litigator is the attorney that's in the courtroom. It's the Atticus Finch, so to speak.
Well, the thing was, and probably still is to a great degree in the big firms, that litigators didn't often get into court. They prepared cases, but a lot of it was done on paper. They were not trial firms, even though in other types of firms, the litigator would have the complete skill set. You'd put the case together and you'd try it. Where my experience was unusual is that the firm did do a fair amount of trial work. They would take things because of the client mix. The firm stood out in that it did serious trial work. But where I lucked out was that I started being given trial work almost immediately. I don't think I was a second-year lawyer when I had my first trial assigned. This is in an era when lots of senior partners, they'd been there like 20 years, had never tried a case.
Wow.
They may have argued motions in court, but they had never tried a case. So I started trying cases, and which got more and more complex. And I was given a lot of responsibilities. So at the end of that 10 years, I had court experiences that basically nobody else had access to. It was very unusual. And when Disney called, one of the big things was, oh, you've done all this. You know, they're hiring younger people. We'll get into what was going on at Disney at the time, but it was a compelling factor in my coming to the company.
Was the fact that you had this trial experience.
Yeah.
And by the way, the folks listening, I just want you to know, we're going to start getting into the weeds and talking about some crazy legal cases that Ed was involved with over the years. And we're going to give some disclaimers about this stuff, because Ed's only going to talk about stuff that's in the public record. There's other things that he's not going to talk about, but I'm going to poke him and try and get more out of him. So.
Now, you asked the question earlier on before we jumped into music. Where's the Disney connection? What was my interest?
Yeah, so what was your, I mean, did you have an interest in Disney prior to ever working for them?
Well, I remember that the first movie I ever saw in a theater was Fantasia. Oh. And that would have been a re-release sometime in the early 50s. Mm-hmm. And I also remember knowing who this guy was, Walt Disney, who made movies. And then in 1954, Disneyland comes on television.
Yeah, the Disneyland show, yeah.
So I'm 7 years old. Here's this guy who just, invited you to watch what he's doing, to hear about all his projects. And you see this park being, in stop motion, this park being built, this fabulous thing. And these programs about guys drawing cartoons. And, he'd name them, and you'd feel that you were getting to know them. And I was already into the Disney comic books, especially Carl Barks, the Ducks.
The Donald Duck stuff, yeah.
And in fact, one of my, it's here in my home office, a crib toy when I was a baby.
Really?
Is a stuffed Donald about this big, which must have been done in the late 30s or early 40s. And it's still on a shelf in my office. So I was clearly marked as a Disney fanatic. I drew comic books. I got the books on how to animate and, drawing cartoon figures. And I wrote a letter to Walt Disney Productions, sending some of this stuff, saying, I want to work for you. And
how old were you when you did that?
I don't know, like 8.
Okay.
And I got a letter back.
Oh, you did get a letter.
I got a letter back from a man called Joe Reddy.
Okay.
And I've never run into anybody
who knew him.
I actually knew who he was. But it was one of those, keep it up, someday maybe you'll work for us and all. And the problem was for me that I didn't really have any talent at it. I mean, I was like any other kid. I drew like any other kid drew. But in doing it, I felt like I was, vicariously participating in what the studio was doing. So I was reading about Walt Disney. Somewhere around that time, Diane Miller's book, the Pete Martin interviews, came out.
Yeah.
And, I had a really comprehensive history of Walt's career and of what the company was doing up to then. I was really into this. There wasn't much to read about Walt then, but so I've kind of identified with the company and saw everything that came out, watched the Mickey Mouse Club, knew who all those people were. I remember seeing, I don't know where I got them, but big color photographs of the lot in the late 1950s. And I said, what a place.
It looked like a campus.
I want to be there.
Yeah.
So my hobby, my Disney hobby, kind of branched into an interest in photography, still photography, and then 8mm film. And I was through high school hardly without a camera of some sort in my hand, making small movies. Roughly the same time Steven Spielberg was making his 8mm movies, one of which carried a credit of something like a film by Stevie Spielberg. I didn't give myself credit like that, but this was a hobby, and I joined that with a hobby in tape recording. I had a reel-to-reel, an old hand-me-down reel-to-reel recorder, I think from the early 50s. It was called a brush sound mirror. And it weighed like 40 pounds. I mean, I could hardly lift this thing. It was a monster. That was what a tape recorder looked like in those early days. And so I was trying to combine the two, can I make like documentary tapes that could be accompanied by film? And this is a big interest for a while. And I continued to follow, to the extent you could, Disney. But as you got into the teen years, you know, and this is the 60s, so you leave behind.
Did you see some of the live action movies?
Oh, I saw them all.
Herbie the Love Bug and
until
like
I went
that.
to college, I saw whatever was out that he was doing, especially if it had Haley Mills in it. And then while I was in college, I was a freshman. My dorm was at Broadway and 114th Street, and across the street was a newsstand, and I'd occasionally go over to the newsstand and look at or pick up one of the early editions at 7:00 when they would drop off the next morning papers. And I walked over there and I saw the headline on the Daily News. It said, "Walt Disney dead at 66.
Wow.
So that brought back, a surge of memories and emotion. And I continued to the extent you could, because there wasn't all that much written. Read stuff about, there was a Richard Schickel book guy used to review.
Yeah, he was a critic. He wrote a book about Disney, and
kind of
the Bob Thomas book as well.
Bob Thomas was gentle, but Schickel was like, over psychologizing Walt. So I had this tenuous interest in the company, having expressed my desire to be there. So that's the 60s. 18 years later, I'm at the law firm, and a big part of my practice at the time, the late 70s and the early 80s, were an era of, and the listeners will recall this terminology of the takeover wars, and tender offers, and big investors were trying to buy up companies and take them apart and profit on
sell
them
off
assets and selling them separately.
Sell off the pieces because they perceived the pieces more valuable than the whole.
And there were other companies that were buying up a miscellany of smaller companies to build up conglomerates. And one of those was Gulf and Western, which made replacement auto parts, and then added companies that made socks and clothing and, jet engine parts and, who knows what, just a miscellany of businesses. But one of the businesses that Gulf and Western had bought was Paramount Pictures. which had been a client of our firm since the 1930s,
Wow.
and then eventually departed, but somebody came back into the firm with Paramount as a client. So in 1980, I was on a big case that involved Paramount, a lot of the other movie companies. We didn't really have an entertainment practice. This was a business deal. The movie companies were creating what they hoped would be a competitor to HBO, which was, the biggest game in town at the time.
At the time, yeah.
And I got to know some of the Paramount people, briefly. Case only went on a few months. But I remembered some of them, and one or two of them remembered me. This becomes significant in a minute.
Oh, I think our listeners are probably going, well, wait a second, Michael Eisner and Frank Wells and Jeffrey Katzenberg, and
well, they got to the right place.
Yeah.
The other thing was in the middle part of 1984, and I'm keeping up on all this tender offer stuff. I see that one of the biggest deals or attempted deals going on was Disney. And the shorter version of the story is the error was triggered by a purchase or a series of purchases by a man called Saul Steinberg, who obviously wanted to take over Disney, and he bought a big chunk of stock. And Disney, which had been, fiercely independent little company for decades now, knew what was going to happen if Steinberg was able to take it over. So there were lots of articles. I mean, you could follow Disney for weeks and weeks and weeks, the machinations that were going on, defensive maneuvers. It was typical of target firms to try to go out and find a friendly investor who would, one way or another, protect them from the raiding investor. And that was one of the things that Disney did. One of the other things that Disney did was buy back from Saul Steinberg the stock
at a premium.
At a premium,
yeah,
which gave rise to shareholder lawsuits. The premise being, wait a minute, if you're going to give that man $1.20 for a stock that the market is valuing at $1, and I'm already a shareholder, you're cheating me. You're giving away company money to buy the same stock you could have bought from me, and maybe I wouldn't have charged you a premium.
Yeah.
Or maybe a smaller premium. Well, the defensive maneuver that Disney was primarily noted for was the arrival of the Bass brothers from Fort Worth, Texas, who owned a number of things. And through a series of connections, the Bass brothers came in to be more traditional participants with Disney and sold Disney the Arvida Corporation that they owned, which was a big real estate developer in Florida and to an extent in California. And it was through those connections that the change in management happened, and you ultimately end up with Roy coming back to the board after a 7-year absence, and Michael Eisner as chairman and CEO, and Frank Wells as president.
Who we should point out, Frank Wells was an old classmate of Roy E.'s.
Classmate and traveler with him, and adventurer with him, and remained, they remained friends. So that was clearly the what was going to be the new regime.
Yeah.
And a lot of Paramount people started coming over, and I read this newspaper article about one of the people that I had worked with on that case, and I said, this must be pretty good. These people are, they're going to do what would typically happen when the top management changes, they're going to make a lot of changes underneath them, and they're going to bring in a lot of their own people.
Yeah.
And at one point, I remember somebody had counted 72 Paramount executives followed
Yeah.
Michael and Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Um,
And Frank was an executive at Warner Brothers.
yeah, he'd been head of the
Yeah.
Warner Brothers studio
Yeah.
and had taken a year off to climb
Mount
6
Everest.
of the 7 highest
Okay,
mountains
yeah,
in the world.
yeah,
He didn't
yeah.
make it to the top of Everest.
Right.
So yeah, when he came back, he wasn't at Warner anymore, and he was free to take on his role as president. And so I followed this, even though we had no involvement either in the Paramount transition or in the Disney escapades.
And you were still based in New York.
I'm still in New York following all this
right.
stuff. And then one day I got a call from somebody who said, you're going to get a phone message from this new general counsel at Disney, who had come in from Disney's major outside law firm because of all of the stock securities issues that were going on. And he said, would you come out and talk to us? And I said, yeah, all right. I didn't tell him. I thought that when I was a kid, I wanted to work there. But I went out and talked and had what I thought was the strangest job interview you could have. It started at 10 in the morning and we quit at 5 in the afternoon.
Really?
Having a great relaxed time, swapping stories. 3 guys, Peter Nolan, who was the chief copyright lawyer, you knew, and Joe Santinello. Peter had been there 13 years. Joe had been there 2 months. And Joe Shapiro, the new general counsel, had been there about 4 or 5 months. Everything was relaxed, informal. I went through the whole studio. And I got back to New York, and 2 days later, I got a phone call saying, when can you come?
And that's a major decision, because you are going to quit your job in New York at a venerable law firm and move across the country to California. Did you ever live in California prior to that?
No, I had only been to California a couple of times. I didn't even go to Disneyland until I was, 32 years old. That was my first trip to a piece of company real estate, and was fascinated. How do they do this?
How could you not be, right? I mean, it's you're leaving the real world behind when you go through the gates.
So it was the New York trial work that was a big factor because of where the company was legally at the time. It didn't have anybody who had done what I did and was what they needed doing, both to deal with the shareholder cases and the beginning of an era when a lot of claimants were coming forward to cash in on what then was seen as a bonanza in home video.
Home entertainment, right? The VHS was out.
So you had all this intellectual property stuff now being thrown up for grabs by claimants, which is a big problem for the company. And this shareholder ordeal where, company had paid something like $72 million, which in 1984 was,
substantial,
a lot of money.
Yeah. So, I mean, they paid Saul Steinberg the $72 million to get his block of stock back.
Right.
Yeah.
So that they could remain independent. That didn't stop other raiders from coming forward, attempting to do the same thing. And that followed right through the end of the summer of 84. And I got there in the summer of 85. Yeah. And it was still going on. We didn't dispose of that. All didn't go away for another couple of years.
And I know we're going to start bumping up against time, but I want to ask you this one last question before we have to come back for next week. But your music background had to have been an asset because of Disney's huge music catalog, and the fact that music is such a integral part of the Disney experience, if you will.
Absolutely. It was a, I wouldn't say it was a majority of my work, but it was a big chunk from time to time where music issues, the actual music would be in issue. Did Disney infringe on somebody else's musical property? I used to keep a music score paper in my office because people would come and bring these problems to me, and I'd work out, on paper what I'm hearing that they're saying is now being put in issue, and we'd work out how you would approach defending against those claims, in music, using music to defend them.
Because you could read music and
read it and do it in my
write
head.
it. You could
spell
write
it out
music.
and do it on the piano.
Wow.
So I became like the music guy for a lot of that. Some of it never went to litigation, but you had to prepare as though you were going to be sued.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think with that, I want to sort of pick up next week and talk about some of those early cases, because I think we could talk about Peggy Lee, can't we?
Yes, that was public.
Yeah,
Quite.
we could talk. We could talk about the whole Lady and the Tramp thing and the VHS that came out and all of that. So why don't we do that next week? When we come back, we'll pick up on the music litigation and home entertainment, really, and we'll go from there. And I'm sure we're going to be setting alarm bells off over at Disney Corporate. So, so anyway, Ed, we'll see you next week.
Just
All
get
right?
the coffee machine fixed upstairs.
I will do it. All right. So I'll see you next week. Thank you for being on the Skull Rock podcast.
Thank you, Dave.
Let's get out of here!
Come on, Scotty, let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here. Let's get out of here, Lieutenant.
That wraps up the first part with Ed Nowak. And the stories he can tell.
I just love that bumper coming out of the interview. I just think that's awesome. It's really fantastic, Aljon.
I know. I'm gonna have to put some more of those together. I remember Chris Bannis saying, "You gotta do some more bumpers, maybe with like You're Killing Me, Smalls," and I'm gonna have to do that sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. But Ed's terrific. I'm honored to call him a friend, and I think the interview, over the next 4 weeks is just going to be terrific. I think our listeners are going to love it. I'll be curious to hear what some of our listeners have to say about it.
I can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun. Once again, tune in next week for more great stories from Ed. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to the very end. If you love Disney and pop culture, be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform, as well as YouTube. Dave said it. Get out there, hit up YouTube, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Be sure to leave us comments. Every little bit helps the algorithm. And also check out our shorts. We're going to be putting in
check your shorts. That's right,
shorts.
Aljon. Check your shorts.
Check your shorts. Check your shorts because you may have missed them. But be sure to check the shorts because we're going to put up more little quips from Dave because that's how we roll. So check the shorts, Dave's shorts, and make sure they're nice and tight. Okay? You can also send us those emails. We appreciate it. Dave or Aljon at skullrockpodcast.com. Check me out on Instagram, Aljon Go. I would appreciate it. Also, the other show that I host, it's a great podcast called Dining at Disney. We're also doing a lot of really cool video content these days. So check out Dining at Disney podcast on Facebook and everywhere you find podcasts. Dave?
Well, Aljon, I want to let people know that my Tunes Behind the Tunes show on Sirius XM, Disney Hits, channel 133, all during the month of January, we're featuring the song Best of Friends from Fox and the Hound. How's that? Yeah, and it's sung by the great Pearl Bailey. It's a wonderful song. Check it out on the Tunes Behind the Tunes on Sirius XM Disney Hits Channel 133. As always, you can always get some of my books at theoldmillpress.com. You can get signed copies, so check out theoldmillpress.com, including, by the way, the Old Mill Press is releasing 2 new books, The Art of John Canemaker and Animator's Garden, by John Canemaker, the great historian. He's been a guest several times with us here on the Skull Rock podcast. And also A Spoonful of Sugar, the story of the Upjohn Pharmacy in Disneyland by Stephen Hall. Both of those are releasing this coming week. So check that out. And you can always go to my website, davidbossert.com. There's plenty of free content and free stuff you can send away for. So check that out. And I also want to mention, Aljon, that next Saturday, I'm going to be up in New York City because John Canemaker is hosting a screening of newly restored animated shorts at MoMA, at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. And I'm going up there. I'm going to go see that because I got to tell you, I'm just excited about some of these cartoons that he's going to be screening. He's going to be showing a digitally restored version of Gertie the Dinosaur from 1914 by Winsor McKay.
That's amazing.
He's showing a crazy cat in the Awful Spook cartoon, Wicked City from Paul Terry of Terry Toons, Mutt and Jeff in the Globetrotters, and that's directed by Charles Bowers. You know, these are names from early in the animation history.
That's amazing.
Swat the Fly from Dave Fleischer, Hawaiian Birds, another one from Dave Fleischer of Fleischer Brothers, and Dig from 1972, the John and Faith Hubley film, as well as John Canemaker's screening Confessions of a Star Dreamer and Bridgehampton. And I would point out Bridgehampton is there's a chapter on his Bridgehampton film in his new book, John Canemaker, The Art of John Canemaker and Animator's Garden. So that's happening next Saturday, the 17th, at the Museum of Modern Art in Manhattan. So check that out. Tickets are still available.
Give John our best. That's
I will.
Amazing.
And with that, Aljon, I'm just going to say, go out and have a fantastic week. Be kind to one another. And we'll see you back here next Monday, right here on the Skull Rock Podcast.